By the time I pulled into the drive, the sky had gone the color of a worn brass button and maple leaves carpeted the gravel like a red rug rolled out for ghosts. The house still smelled faintly of ripe apples, my childhood's aftershave, but the kitchen waiting behind the front door was wrong. Vanilla candles instead of coffee, a blue floral runner that had never lived here, the frames with Grandma's pictures, gone from the shelf like they'd never had a home. Lydia slid out of the hallway in soft-soled shoes that made no sound and a smile that felt like sandpaper. "You're back," she said, sweet, temperature set to cold. She was hugging a cardboard box labeled yard sale. I caught a flash of the old silver frame that used to sit by the cider press, the one with Grandma holding me and both of us laughing, sprayed by apple foam. "Just decluttering," Lydia said. "Fresh energy." My father hovered in the doorway like a worn-out sentry, black funeral suit, tie clip still on. "Roof's leaking. Furnace won't shut up," he reported, as if giving damage control after a storm. "Lydia's helping me get this place under control." He wouldn't meet my eyes, the same eyes that once learned to read grid errors off a map and now couldn't read his face past the hesitation. I took my duffel down the hall to my old room. The knob didn't budge. The lock had been changed, quiet and final. A yellow note on the door, wet paint, do not enter. I knocked once. No answer. Fresh paint smothered the cedar smell I grew up on. It drilled something small and mean straight through my chest. I set my hand to the knob again like I could muscle someone else's decision into a different shape. "That room needs work," Lydia said behind me. "While we sort it out, you can use the shed. I had it cleaned. It's cozy." She smiled like a front desk clerk checking in a walk-in. I swallowed my first response and swapped it for a short nod. In my head, the floor plan lit up on its own. Entry points, lines of sight to the yard, best perch for a camera if I ever needed one, that dark seam between the fence and the parking pad. Habit flips on like a switch after years in uniform. Lydia's cozy shed was a wood room that smelled like motor oil. A yellow bulb washed a concrete floor stained by old seasons. On a shelf sat a banker's box labeled Paperwork 1983, dusted like a cake with powdered sugar. I set my bag down, brushed the lid clean, and opened it. Fertilizer receipts, winter insurance notes, county fair flyers. At the bottom, an old bank envelope with a defunct logo, empty, torn at the mouth. The inside paper showed the thirsty palm print of time. Walt poked his head in, knit cap tugged low. "Kiddo," he said, same as he always had before I ever wore a name tape. "Your grandma left you a thing or two, said you'd know when to come looking. I don't meddle, I just keep quiet." He let the quiet sit, farmer quiet, the kind that gives meaning room to grow. "If you need it, the press still runs. New belt." He chin-pointed toward the shadow where the metal beast slept. I walked to the cider press. The long scratches down the stainless looked like 100 seasons worth of fingerprints. I pulled the little drawer under the belly. It squealed. Metal and dried apple rose together and cracked a glass-fragile memory. Grandma's hand on mine, "Don't rush, let it run." The drawer was empty. My breath caught, then I laughed at myself for expecting miracles to live in the first place I touched. The army taught me, miracles aren't plans. Plans are plans. I squared a corner of the shed, spread my thin green army blanket for a mattress, set my field notebook on a crate like a second brain. SFC Brooks, mission start, hold the house, hold the orchard. I wrote it like an op order. Left page, I sketched the house, front door, back door, kitchen window, the gravel turnout, best camera angle to catch the table. Right page, I wrote soft rules. No confrontation without facts, no talking hot. Always ask one open question that pulls a thread. Logistics 101. Everything's a chain. Find the right link and tug. Dinner sat quiet like a fragile ceasefire. Lydia set down baked apples dusted in a white snow of sugar. My inventory reflex spun up, Grandma's frame missing. The embroidered home towel gone, the thin blade apple peeler she loved nowhere on the rack. "Where are her things?" I asked, mild as reading a coordinate. "Boxed for the yard sale," she smiled. "The house needs to breathe." My father spoke to his plate instead of me. "Everything changes, kiddo." I laid my fork down. "These aren't just things," I said, level, and let silence do the rest. Arguing now would cost me position. I needed intel, not a win by mouth. Lydia's shoulders lifted, the smallest shrug, her eyes skimming to my father like a reminder to complete a form. He talked about heating bills and land taxes and shingles that needed replacing. I listened and sorted, stripping the music off the excuses until the true sounds stood there plain. By the time I slipped back to the shed, the sky had thickened to ink. A black SUV idled a few yards past the fence, lights off, the driver lit by a phone's small, mean glow. I didn't stare. No need to tip my hand. I shut the shed, clicked the yellow light on like a period at the end of a sentence. In it, I noticed another box deeper on the metal rack, green painter's tape reading. Receipts, Nora. Nora, the safe box manager at the town bank. The name tapped once on the inside of my skull. I dragged the box out, dust puffed like a small weather system. Old slips stacked like fallen leaves. In the middle, a dark note: "If you need it, look where she hides things, not the bright places." I smiled. Grandma always loved a scavenger hunt. I knelt, under the rubber mat, under the screwdriver tin, under the press drawer. Nothing. I stood, slapped dust off my knees, and looked out the little window. The SUV was gone. Dark came back and pretended to be peace. I wrote into the book, "Sentimental assets being replaced on purpose. Personal room locked. Yard sale indicators. Name Nora on file box. Verify bank safe deposit." Then I double underlined verify. I killed the light and listened to the house breathe. Wind pulling through door gaps, apple branches scraping tin, the heater taking one long old man sigh. Somewhere in the dark, Grandma's voice came like a gentle command. "Hold fast, then move." Tomorrow I start in the kitchen, with the empty hook where the apple peeler should be. One missing tool always announces something bigger being moved. And if the army taught me anything, it's that every successful convoy starts by counting the smallest parts. Afternoon slid off the eaves like a thin apple slice, and the house carried a kind of promise I hadn't signed for. Vanilla candles, fake flowers, new curtains hanging straight like uniforms that had never seen the field. I opened the kitchen cabinet for Grandma's embroidered home towel and found a clean, surgical absence. Lydia stood at the counter in a striped apron, gloved hands wrapping each blue-glazed bowl in newspaper. "Just trying to brighten things up," she said, like repainting a memory in a trend color. Every crinkle of paper cinched another cord around my chest. My father hauled a ladder into the living room and climbed up to take down family frames. He hid his hesitation by talking about rusty screws. "Snow's coming. Furnace needs service. Taxes are up. Not sure how long I can carry this," he said, a man on an old bridge listening to wood complain, already mapping a retreat. From the corner, I watched him the way you watch a fragile convoy, one bad turn and everything shatters. Dinner came with buttered baked apples and healthy pan chicken. Lydia poured white wine and held the glass like a microphone. "We need a fresh mindset," she said. "What about turning the back acreage into an experience? Glamping, cozy. People love canvas tents and outdoor tubs. We could charge by the night." She tipped her head toward me. Light caught in her eyes like small, tame sparks. I took a sip of water. "My grandmother called the back field the lungs of this house," I said. "Bathtubs don't belong on lungs." A soft knock, Walt edged in, arms full of dry apple branches for kindling. His gaze counted what memories had survived. "Want me to start the stove?" he asked. Lydia smiled politely. Mark's got it. Walt set the bundle in the corner and gave me a tiny eye signal, punctuation shaped like a semicolon. Be careful. Then he slipped back out like a draft. Before I finished chewing, the back door swung and a man with a well-practiced smile stepped in. Cole, chambray shirt, bright watch, white soles untouched by our dirt. Cole Harrington, he said. Lydia and I have chatted about the property's potential. He nodded at me the way you nod at a minority shareholder. Lydia's voice lifted half a key. He's experienced. Turns farms into destinations, not just orchards. Cole fanned out glossy brochures, canvas tents on manicured grass, strings of Edison bulbs like fake fireflies. Picture it, he tapped with his pen. Walking trail, stargazing deck, outdoor kitchen. We leverage the family story, heritage marketing. City folks pay to taste ordinary. We just need to improve the lane, lay a few platforms, pull temporary permits. He said permits like they were buttons you press. Lydia's index finger kept time on the table, steady as the sink clock. I flipped a brochure and caught the wet ink smell. Anyone loopin' the land trust yet? I asked, like asking for the salt. Cole stalled for a beat, then kept sliding. Those things are flexible. A lot of places want growth. I didn't correct him, didn't argue. I just filed one fact. He didn't know the current flowing under this ground, or he intended not to. After dinner, Lydia shoveled keepsakes into a yard sale box. Grandma's silver frame flipped face down, its glass scratched by a hair-thin line. I picked it up and cupped the photo to save it from further damage. Old things just clutter, Lydia said. They block the eye. I tucked the frame gently into a cabinet and closed the door quiet, the way you tuck someone into temporary shelter. Logistics rule. Before you move anything, know where it's going. On the counter, half hidden by home decor magazines, a stack poked out, appraisal preliminary with a valuation firm's logo. Pink highlighter circled numbers. In the margin, better price if subdivided woods section. I rested my hand on the stack without moving it, felt the cold weight like a stone dropped in a pond. A post-it quivered under the window draft. Attorney C. Ames meet re. POA. Not my father's handwriting. In the living room, he fussed with another frame while Lydia lectured composition. They didn't see me. I inhaled, re-squared the stack exactly as found, and left no prints but my patience. Cole borrowed the living room for a call, voice lowered, but the old wood walls didn't care. Yeah, looks good. Owner's hesitant, but we'll have the POA soon. Don't worry. Every soon, he said, dropped down my spine like stones on a cellar stair. Back in the kitchen, Walt dried his hands on a rag. His eyes paused on the post-it for a beat. In a breath, he said, "Don't let them into the old records room." The back door side shut and left a peel of apple scent. Evening thickened like gelatin. I carried a yard sale box out to the garage and noticed a carton-stamped smart doorbell kit. Open, parts rolling around. Lydia had already put eyes on the front door, which meant arrivals and departures would be archived, a narrative about who belongs here told by a feed I didn't control. I logged it mentally and moved on. My father walked Cole to the porch. Their handshake lasted longer than courtesy. "I get the pressure," Cole said. "Land's expensive to keep. Let money work." I slipped into the shed, threw the yellow switch, and let the light pull me back to a world less shiny and more true. On the rack, I sorted boxes into rough years. My hand hit a stiff folder. Inside, 2 faded photos, Grandma shaking hands with a woman in front of a town hall sign. On the back, in ink, the day we signed the promise. My spine straightened like I'd just heard a bugle. Field notebook, new line. Glamping proposed, appraisal shows subdivision intent. Post-it, Addie C. Ames, POA, smart doorbell installed. Walt warns, old records room. Then one short line, Dad is being pulled toward convenience. I didn't blame him. Convenience is a paved road. My road has always had gravel. Before lights out, I slid open the press drawer and set my hand in the cold, empty space. Nothing. Outside, wind combed the orchard and leaves answered with a long sigh. Tomorrow, I follow Nora and every receipt with her name. I need to know the safe box still exists and what that promise day meant. Power dinner's over. My turn to set the table. Night dropped over the shed like a thick blanket that smelled of machine oil. I sat on my field blanket with my back against the metal rack, listening to wind scrape the tin roof like a blade peeling an apple. Overhead, the yellow bulb trembled. I opened the paperwork 1983 box again, patient as untangling a length of parachute cord. There were yellowed invoices, a few county fair postcards, a handwritten menu Grandma made for the fall festival. Pressed flat at the bottom lay a fat notebook in checkered cloth, the cider recipe book, and the faintest breath of cinnamon lifted when I cracked it open. Tucked between ratios of tart to sweet apples was a wax-sealed envelope stamped with a little leaf. I rubbed the seal. The wax flaked like old skin, and I eased it apart. Inside, a letter in Grandma's hand, slope-shouldered and careful, the rhythm of somebody who always writes with her heart before her fingers. Elena, this land breathes through its rows of trees. By the time you read this, the house may carry voices that are not ours. Don't argue before you have your facts. Stand steady, watch, and then move. One day someone will tell you a different set of lungs still counts as breathing. Show them a split apple in full sun, then ask if they can still smell it. No preaching, no grand sermon, just a seed of patience pressed into my palm. At the margin, she'd drawn a tiny arrow to a line. If you need it, the key is where your hands always drift when you help me. I looked at my hands, calluses from pallets and ratchet straps, and around the room. My hands always drifted to the cider press. The metal beast slept in the corner. The lever felt like wrist bone in a long night shift. I yanked the little belly drawer, dry squeal. Empty. I tried again, slower this time, tapping the bottom panel with a fingernail. The sound changed from solid to hollow. Something was glued under there. I crouched, slid a small blade under the edge, and lifted a thin strip of wood. A tiny key fell into my palm, cold as a raindrop. I held it between two fingers and felt the exact sensation of Grandma still here. Discipline woke up inside me. I opened my field notebook to a fresh page. Mission statement: protect family heritage legally, without violence. Primary objective: block conversion of use, keep the orchard alive. I wrote ROE. No provoking physical conflict. Every interaction has a witness or written notes. Move necessary conversations to polite email, not hot texts. Laud, within 10 days, verify any land encumbrance. If it exists, get the right people into the right room. Walt knocked softly, head sliding in like he didn't want to spill the dark. You're up. His eyes found the key and lit with a quiet, older kind of joy. Your grandma talked about a safe deposit at the bank. Said when the time came, the key would find you. I didn't ask more. He set a small flashlight on my table. Old records room has mice. Watch yourself. He left a trail of damp would smell and boot scrape on gravel. I made for the records room and shouldered the hinge-stuck door. The air was thick with dust. Cobwebs mapped flight paths across the ceiling. A low wood cabinet hugged the floor. The last drawer had a spring latch. I pulled, and a bundled cloth thumped out, unfurling into Grandma's apple peeler. The thin blade flashed a tired gleam. My thumb touched the worn handle, and a sad, simple peace moved through me. Something someone tried to erase from the kitchen had walked back into the right hand on its own. I rinsed the blade with water from a jug, dried it, and planted it in a block of scrap wood like a flag stuck in a captured hill. Then I returned to the notebook and sketched my people objects tasks grid. People: Lydia, Cole, Dad, Walt, Nora. Objects: The safe key, the recipe book, the peeler, the file boxes, the smart doorbell kit. Tasks: verify the safe box, speak to Nora, sweep the kitchen for displaced keepsakes, cross-check the attorney post-it, log any unfamiliar vehicles. I ticked boxes like laying out a supply line for a campaign. On my phone, I drafted an email to Nora. I'm Elena, Me's granddaughter. I'd like to ask about a safe deposit box in her name. I have the key. I can come by. I didn't send it yet. The Army taught cadence, right person, right time, right proof. I set a soft alarm and lay down on the blanket, listening to the house. Outside, the orchard whispered tree talk. Inside, my heart found a steady march down a long barracks hallway. Morning bit the air. I brewed coffee in Walt's old kettle. The bitterness ran like a line test for alertness. The big kitchen was empty, but the table still wore the appraisal preliminary stack. I set my palm on the wood like greeting a named adversary. I opened the cabinet where I'd hidden Grandma's frame last night. Still there, unscratched. I propped it up, turned her face toward light. Her eyes asked, "Ready?" My phone hummed. Unknown number. Need POA before we proceed. Tomorrow 10:30 showing the backwoods, prep to discuss price. That time sat on the screen like a grid coordinate. A switch dropped inside me. I took a screenshot, filed it in a folder called Intel, and underlined in my notebook. 10:30, observe on site, gather facts, no confrontation. I slipped the key into my jacket pocket and buttoned it, sealing a secret. I picked up the apple peeler, not as a threat, but as a reminder that small things have an edge. Before I stepped out, I wrote one more line, half order, half oath. Hold the rhythm, hold the orchard, hold yourself. If they plan to turn this land's breath into a product, they would have to look first at the steady heart beating in my chest. Morning opened with a bite at my collar and that faint, half-awake smell of fermenting apples. I pushed into the shed, flicked on the yellow bulb, and turned the room into a proper FOB. Folding table in the middle, a Google-printed map spread wide, red and blue pins pricking the front door, back door, sight lines to the parking pad, the path where tires had chewed fresh gravel. With a marker, I traced a route looping the fence line. On the wall, I taped a checklist. Intel cycle, collect, process, analyze, act, R. The logistics part of my brain grinned like it was back on the training range. Walt came with a thermos of black coffee and a sack of apple turnovers. Say the word, he said, eyes on the map the way farmers study a planting calendar. I'll keep tabs on who comes and goes. I nodded. If you see that black SUV again, ping me, and no arguing with anyone on my behalf. He smiled, the wrinkle lines in his face deepening like leaf veins. Just observing. I cracked the receipts Nora box again and sifted out deposit slips and an old safe deposit box fee notice, my grandmother's name crisp on the line. Paper like an anchor bite, keeping my little boat from drifting with every modernization pitch. I snapped photos, filed them in evidence, and wrote in the field book. Safe deposit confirmed, verify with Nora, key in hand. At the kitchen threshold, Lydia staged the house for photos, shifting chairs, lifting curtains for light. A good listing bumps the price. She narrated to her phone more than to me. My father followed with a tub of screws, asked if I'd eaten without looking at me. His eyes stayed on Lydia's back. I have, I said, voice so neutral it felt like a radio on push-to-talk. Transmit only when necessary. The town library breathed paper and thick wool carpet made every footstep behave. Nora sat behind the desk, silver hair tied back, eyes smiling when she saw me. Me's girl, she said. I set the tiny key in her palm. Pretty sure this belongs to my grandmother. Nora weighed it like an apple, then nodded. Right cut. Your mother's box still shows active. Bring ID and we'll log you in. The band around my chest loosened a notch. Are you on this afternoon? She flipped her ledger and clicked her pen. Tomorrow at 15:00. Come then, we'll open it. The number slid into place with the clean feel of a locked coordinate. On the way back, I ducked into the electronics shop. Shelf after shelf of indoor cameras stood at attention. I picked a quick-mount model with local storage and motion alerts. The clerk talked too much. I only needed 3 specs: wide angle, resolution, retention. I knew exactly where it would sit, on the shed's crossbeam, peeking through the cracked door toward the kitchen table, enough to read shapes and catch muffled sound, not enough to trespass where I had no right to be. I paid for a memory card, a spare battery, and a roll of good tape, the tool that saves every blue-collar operation. The corner cafe worked its usual spell, same voices, same chairs. From a window seat, I watched Cole arrive, brown jacket, calibrated smile. He ordered a latte and sweet-talked the owner about experience markets, dusting words like cinnamon, peaceful, clean, profitable. I didn't turn. I watched his reflection in the glass, hands busy like he was adjusting a suitcase strap. When he said POA, I dotted my notebook again, keyword frequency climbing. By noon, I was back in the shed installing. Camera snug on the beam, cable tucked behind the wood, card clicked in place. The frame looked right. Round kitchen table centered, the back door a bright diagonal, yard sale boxes stacked like shipments ready to load. I set my phone as a monitor, killed the chime, left it on vibrate, the invisible tap on the wrist that says your eyes can be in 2 places at once. I wrote myself a recording SOP, only when I'm a party to the call, begin with harmless questions, no leading, no threats. I have no interest in being anyone's dark mirror. My creed, sleep clean. At the bottom of the page, I drew a blank AAR box for the night. Walt poked in to report a delivery driver had asked for our place a few days back. Smart doorbell kit. I thanked him and waved it off. A new surveillance toy in Lydia's hands meant our comings and goings were being digitized, meant she was curating a story about who belongs in this house. Me, I was building a different story, who belongs on this land. Toward evening, the bar by the highway started to fill, and gossip rose like yeast. Someone said they'd seen my father enter a small brick office with the shingle C. Ames, attorney. I didn't chase. I opened my notes and wrote, Mark Metzi, Ames confirm. Influence by Lydia/Cole. Hi. I reminded myself, do not turn your own people into targets, even if every arrow of logic wants to land in a bitter place. I stepped outside and breathed air that tasted of warm leaf rot and thin mist. It felt like moving a convoy over a pass. Gear down, spacing right, everybody makes it. Night fell and the kitchen lit up again. On the phone feed, Lydia laid out papers. The appraisal, preliminary stack, and glossy glamping proposals with canvas tents glowing like props. Her voice over the call was honey with a wire in it. We can finalize with Mark tomorrow. The POA needs to happen fast. I'd heard enough. I left the camera running, set it to charge, and inked tomorrow's objective like a line of fire on a map. Nora 1500 open box. Straight, spare, decisive. Before lights out, I set the apple peeler beside my notebook, blade turned inward, a small but absolute safety rule. Outside, tree shadows mapped veins on the shed wall. In my head, Grandma's voice, don't argue without the facts. Tomorrow, I'll have the facts. And once a piece of land has its legal voice, every glossy brochure is just paper. I pulled the blanket up and closed my eyes. Through the wall, the house kept breathing, but this time its rhythm felt closer to mine. The town bank sat on the corner with a pot of yellow mums and rain-worn red brick. I walked in at 3:00 p.m., pulling my coat closed like I was steadying a tray of live rounds. Nora led me past thick walls into a room that smelled like cool metal. The safe deposit vault was small and serious, the fluorescent light so honest it scrubbed everyone's face. She set a metal tray on the table, placed my key beside the bank's, looked at me for a long second, then turned the lock. The click answered like a clean yes. The safe deposit box slid forward. My pulse marked time with the rollers. Inside wasn't much. A brown file tied with cloth string, a fat envelope, and a smaller one addressed in a familiar hand for Elena. I untied the string and opened the file first. Heavy paper, raised seals, a title that couldn't be mistaken even if you wanted to, Agricultural Conservation Easement. Beneath it, my grandmother's name and Vermont Land Trust. I read it like an op order, line by line, clause by clause. My shorthand in the field book. 1. Land is permanently dedicated to agricultural use, no casual subdivision. 2. Any commercial use unrelated to agriculture is restricted or prohibited. Major changes require notice and review by the land trust. 3. The woods behind the house are a conservation buffer, footpaths and maintenance only, absolutely no platforms or lodging. I lifted my head. The room was so quiet the sound of paper touching would fell like a stone down a well. The fat envelope held a boundary map. Grandma's careful schoolteacher lines darkened at the edges, the backwoods ringed in green marker with a note. The wind carries the smell of apples farther here. There was also a confirmation letter from the land trust. First line simple as a handshake. We are honored to steward this with you. On the last page, the contact line carried the name Green, an arrow in the road. I opened the small envelope marked for Elena. Grandma's script was light as a porch whisper. If you've come here, you're ready to learn that loving land isn't hiding it from change. It's choosing how it changes. If anyone tells you profit will make the land happier, show them a row in bloom and ask if money knows how to turn white. I smiled, warm and a little bruised. She always won with language, not table thumps. Nora stood by like a gentle witness. Me was careful, she said. Came in often. Always asked how to keep papers safe for the long haul. I nodded, slid the file into a sleeve, then used my phone to scan each page, tucking the images into my evidence folder like swaddling a newborn. I asked if she knew MS. Green, Nora nodded. Still with the land trust. Good people, call her if you need to. I will, I said, but after one beat. On a lobby bench, I drafted an email to MS. Green, who I was, a few scans attached, a straight summary, a request to meet to make sure we understand obligations. I didn't send it. Logistics is sequence. Collect, verify, act. I wanted to walk back into our kitchen with paper and let them walk into the legal snare they had set. Back home, the town looked kinder somehow. Sun slanted and struck the shed's tin roof, laying down a runway of light. In the FOB, I staged the file, clipped the land trust's web address in my notebook, and wrote a frago, a fragmentary order. Mission, shift from defense to lawful counterattack. Intent, let the other side self-reveal plans that violate the easement, bring the land trust in at the moment of maximum clarity. Tasks. 1. Prep Exhibit A, easement original plus scans plus boundary map. 2. Exhibit B, timeline log of glamping/appraisal/POA. 3. Exhibit C, images/recordings I'm party to. 4. Contact Green once the pattern is undeniable. Row, no touching personal papers outside what I own, present everything in the open, calm voice, command presence. I looked up at the apple peeler parked beside my notebook, blade turned inward, reminding me that sharp can be gentle. I set the boundary map next to it, the green line holding the orchard like an arm. In my head, a small stage assembled itself. Kitchen table, old TV, a pile of glossy, glamping pulp, and one page strong enough to smother the fake fire. I stepped into the main house. On the kitchen table, breathing vanilla candle fumes, lay appraisal, preliminary, numbers ringed in red. Tucked under it like a snake's tongue, a POA draft with my father's name prefilled and the agent line blank. The paper's edge bore someone's thumbnail dent. I didn't touch it. I pulled out a chair and studied that sheet the way you study a cable bridge under tension, knowing one clean cut and the whole span goes slack. Lydia walked in with a fresh, neutral lipstick and the same practiced smile. "I laid out the paperwork so Mark won't be overwhelmed," she said in the tone of a party planner managing the flatware. I served one harmless line. "He reads fine. Small print just takes him longer. Someone should explain the small print." A quick twitch in her eyes, then the flick of a hand. "Cole will." Saying his name, she dropped a coin in water and listened for the rings. I let them fade. Back in the shed, I slid the easement into a rigid sleeve and labeled it Exhibit A. My phone buzzed, a camera alert. The frame caught Lydia rearranging papers, testing the pen at the signature line. I paused the feed and wrote, "POA timeline accelerating. Opponents believe they hold the initiative." I smiled, no swagger, just the knowledge that the ground had shifted. Grandma left me a fine shield. All I had to do as a logistics sergeant was bring it to the right room at the right time. Night came on. I packed the evidence bag, a USB with scans, printed easement, the map, my field notes. At the bottom of the page, I logged an AAR interim. What we have, law and history. What they have, speed and surface. End states usually favor whatever has roots. I folded the book, blew out the light, and listened to the orchard breathe steady. Tomorrow I'll match its rhythm and speak in the language of black ink on white paper. Morning laid a thin mist over the orchard, late apples hanging like paper lanterns. I opened the FOB and walked the checklist. Exhibit A, the easement, rested in its plastic sleeve. Exhibit B, the event log, had enough timestamps. Exhibit C still had gaps. I needed them to say out loud what they meant to do, to touch what they shouldn't touch. No fireworks, no movie drama, just a few well-timed nudges. My first bait was as simple as forgetting a glove on the range table. I printed a generic appraisal template anyone can download, no signatures, no real logo, and underlined a few lines. Best price with subdivision plus wood platforms. Harmless ink. I tucked it into Lydia's appraisal preliminary stack and penciled a note. If POA clears, negotiate the backwoods first. The bait didn't lie. It simply opened a lane for someone else to slide. Walt drifted in with a thermos of coffee. "They're shooting the bedrooms," he said, eyes tilted to the porch like he was gauging wind. I nodded, pulled up my phone, and linked to the beam-mounted camera. The frame looked good. Kitchen table clean, the back door a bright triangle. I killed audio, set motion alerts to vibrate, and wrote in my notebook, "Guardrails only record when I participate or when the subject speaks up on their own. No prompting, no leading." Each line a small shield planted around me. By noon, Lydia had the paper stack on the table. The camera buzzed its first alert. She flipped pages, paused at subdivision, tilted her head like she'd found a beat. I stood in the kitchen doorway, close enough to be a party to whatever was said. "We need the POA to speed this up," Lydia clipped, voice neat as a staple. "What's the POA for?" I asked. She smiled. "To act for your dad so we don't bother the elderly." I said, "He can still read the small print, just slower." She didn't answer, just tapped her phone. The call went to speaker. Cole on the other end. "Once the signature's done, glamping can break ground after the snow. Ames will prep a clean POA. Keep Mark comfortable, don't bring up the easement yet." I didn't cut in. I was there, which meant I could note content. When she hung up, I asked Lydia like asking about weather. "What's an easement?" She shrugged. "Old papers. Later." The word later hit me like a cold stone. Afternoon, I swung by the highway bar. Walt pretended to shop for rope but walked with me like a knowing shadow. From a window booth, I watched my father step into the brick building marked C. Ames, attorney with Cole. They paused on the steps. Cole said something, hand light on my father's shoulder like a guide over a slick span. I shot a photo from distance, no need to zoom, proof doesn't have to be razor sharp to be a nail. I logged the time, not the feeling. Feelings can wait. Back home, I sent a mess. Green a polite email. I found my grandmother's original easement. I want to understand the terms before the family talks next steps. If you're free, I'd like to meet. I hit send and let it drift like a life ring before the current quickened. I didn't name Lydia or Cole. I simply activated a lawful link that lives outside personalities. Toward dusk, Lydia staged a family update, inviting a few neighbors to share the refresh plan. Voices filled the kitchen. I stood a little back, listening to phrases like city guests, stargazing nights, outdoor tubs. My father hunched, tired as an old lamppost. When someone mentioned the backwoods, I slid the boundary map to the table's edge and smiled. That's a buffer. Big changes need land trust approval. Lydia skimmed the map as if walking through rain. Cole patched. Later, let's dream first. I drank water and let the dream stand naked in the light of black and white ink waiting nearby. Night capped the roof and the camera buzzed again. Lydia returned to the kitchen alone. She spread the appraisal preliminary pages, lingered over my bait, pen tapping. She placed a call. I stepped to the doorway, participant status. Ames, if we have the POA, can we rework the backwoods? Platforms, a few canvas tents, closed-loop restrooms. Yes, I know, but easement. Her grandmother's old paperwork. We can handle it. We can handle it sounded like a shrug written on a permit. I didn't interrupt. I let the audio tell the story. Back in the shed, I transcribed her exact phrases. My pen ran fast down the grade, but I kept the wheels straight. Exhibit C started to gain weight. POA to act instead. Don't mention easement first. Rework backwoods, platforms, canvas tents, handle easement. I clipped the page into the file. This isn't a war of loudness. It's a war of keywords. Near midnight, I had Walt pass the bar one more time. He texted back. Cole talking loud about tent deposits. Laughing. I needed nothing further. People who laugh forget minefields. I called a mess. Green left a courteous voicemail. Thank you for replying to my email. I can meet the day after tomorrow any time that suits. My tone was calm, no accusations. I trust law to find its way home. At 22:15, my phone quivered like a small fish. Motion alert. I opened the live feed. The kitchen bloomed on screen. Lydia crouched, digging through the keepsake box. She drew out old cards and notes to match Grandma's signature, lined them beside the POA draft, and set her pen at the blank line for agent. The tip slid a fraction, then stopped as if it had touched a border. A wire tightened one notch in my throat. I didn't rush in, didn't shout. I just watched, letting the frame become the exhibit I would lay out on the day we faced off. Grandma warned me, don't argue without enough facts. Tonight, the facts were walking to me. I closed the phone, leaned against the shelf, and listened to the orchard breathe through the wall. My marker drew one last line at the bottom of the page. Enough. We were over the ridge's midpoint. All that remained was braking at the right place and keeping the wheels straight. Late light stretched across the oil-stained concrete of the cider room. I swung the door wide and let the smell of metal and fermenting apples rise, stubborn as truth once it's loose. Lydia had called a family meeting to announce the new direction. Cole arrived early, jacket knife crease sharp, smile like a sticker that said approved. My father sat on a low wooden chair, fingers laced, eyes lost somewhere among old harvests. Walt took his post by the press, silent, sturdy, load-bearing. Lydia kicked off in MC mode. Thank you for coming. We need a bright future for the farm. Not just tired apple rows anymore, but a destination, canvas tents, outdoor kitchen, a stargazing deck. Her hands drew airy circles like she was spinning one of those gift shop globes. Cole sprinkled in his cinnamon words, optimize, off-season capture, authentic experience. Pretty birds, paper wings. I set my evidence bag on the long table scarred dark by years of sweet spill. Before we talk about a future, I said, voice steady like a convoy brief before a mountain pass, we need to confirm the road actually exists. I hit the remote. The old TV in the corner blinked blue and settled. Eyes on the exhibits. Exhibit A. I laid down the original agricultural conservation easement. The edge of the paper ticked the wood, small sound, hard answer. This is the covenant between my grandmother and the Vermont Land Trust, I said, tapping the flagged clause. This land is permanently bound to agricultural use. The backwoods are a conservation buffer. It says it right here. No subdivision, no lodging unrelated to agriculture, and major changes require notice to the land trust. I didn't look at Lydia or Cole. I looked at my father, drove the words exactly where they needed to land. Lydia smiled thin. Old paperwork, a lot of places can adjust. I didn't take the bait. I clicked to Exhibit B. On screen, a photo of the appraisal preliminary stack on our kitchen table, the post-it that read POA. Next photo, my father under the shingle C, Ames, attorney with Cole. I used 10 words, flat as a swept road. Timeline, people, and paper, everything aligns. Cole cleared his throat. We have a plan. Everything is legal once the POA is in place. I rolled to Exhibit C. The TV showed cuts from the beam cam. Lydia flipping to the subdivision page and her voice on speaker. Once he signs, glamping breaks ground after the snow, don't mention the easement yet. Then the clip of her alone, pen poised over the blank agent line on the POA, eyes comparing Grandma's signature from the keepsake box. The audio wasn't loud, but the meaning was clear. I paused the frame right as the pen tip kissed paper exactly at the border. The room went quiet like someone had switched off the wind. That's edited, Lydia snapped, cheeks flushing like she'd been caught in cold daylight. You're spying on me. I kept my tone even. The camera sits on family property to protect it, and I'm present in the conversations you just heard. I turned to my father. I'm not here to control anyone. I'm here to lay out facts before you sign anything handed to you. The cider room door opened again. MS. Green stepped in leaf-brown scarf, slim case under her arm. She nodded. Her deep blue eyes took in every surface on the table. Apologies for the delay, she said. Green, Vermont Land Trust. I received Elena's email with the scans. Lydia's color shifted. Cole adjusted his collar. MS. Green set her folder beside Exhibit A, flipped to the exact clause. This easement is in force. Any plan for glamping, platforms, or lodging in the buffer is contrary to its terms. The trust has the right to inspect and, if necessary, to enjoin. Cole started to pivot. There are exceptions for agricultural support. There are, MS. Green said, nodding. Barns, sheds, spaces that serve production. Commercial glamping is not one of them. Her voice never rose, but each word went in like a nail. I let silence do its work so the minefield under their feet could map itself. Sheriff Dolly leaned a shoulder into the doorway, cap brim touching the jamb. Everything all right? He asked. We got a call about an argument. MS. Green smiled. We're just reading paper. The sheriff stayed at the frame, sky-neutral eyes. A gentle reminder, this isn't theater. It's life with laws. I faced my father. Dad, I said quietly, you don't have to sign anything today. No one needs a POA to take your voice out of your own house. He lifted his head. His eyes found the old photo I'd placed by the press, him and Grandma, me small as a green apple in his arms. Something fell off his face, not pride, not power, just the fog that had hung there too long. He spoke like confessing to himself. I'm tired. I thought convenience would save this place. Convenience doesn't plant trees, I said. People do. Lydia pivoted toward him, voice sliding into the right tears at the right time. I was only trying to help. Cole cut in, cold as a draft through the door. Lydia, let's talk outside. He hooked a finger at her, then turned half a smile to me. Congratulations, you won this round. I didn't lift my chin. There aren't rounds, there's what's right for the land. Their steps hurried out, a heel nicked the threshold like snagging a root. MS. Green gathered her sticky notes. Elena, she said, if the family wants, the trust can support a sustainable orchard plan. Around here, people respect homes that don't sell their souls. Walt cleared his throat, barely like adding a pinch of cinnamon to warm cider. We still know how to press apples, he said. We just need to make sure nobody presses people. The sheriff nodded and eased the door shut. The room returned to the slow breath of the heating pipes. I slid the exhibits back into my bag, sheathed the easement like a shield. My father stood, careful. Elena, he said, I'm sorry. The apology fell from his mouth like a late-season apple, heavy and fragile. I looked at him through the dust of too many seasons where we didn't know how to talk. I wanted to say forgiveness isn't a signature. It's staying to fix the roof when the weather turns. I just nodded. Big sentences need quiet to lay a road before they walk out. Outside, wind moved the rows, crisp and dry, leaves whispering together. My pulse settled back to feel normal after a downhill run, wheels straight, brakes warm, engine not whining. We hadn't beaten anyone. We'd kept what was worth keeping. The ones who walked out would have to recalc their route. I killed the TV, pulled the plug, and we stood a long time in the room where truth has always been pressed out like cider, clear, thick, and not easily spoiled. First weekday morning, I stepped onto the porch and found the patch behind the cider room clean as a skillet just washed. No sample canvas bags, no coils of string lights, only wind moving through the rows and the old well rope creaking in its throat. Lydia had moved out in a single hurried night. She left my father a text. I'm sorry. I don't think I belong here. I didn't answer for him. Everyone has to learn to stand inside their own quiet. Coal evaporated like foam off cider, a few damp brochures curling on the kitchen corner. Dad came to the shed hugging the steel document box. His face was hollowed out but brighter, like a man who just walked up from a tunnel. I didn't sign anything, he said, voice wobbly but clear. I called Ames, canceled. I need a plan to handle taxes, fix the roof, and relearn how to farm this place without selling its soul. I looked at the box and thought of all the seasons he chose silence. Let's write a family SOP, I said. One task a week. Start with the east roof, then the gutters, then the cold room. He nodded and exhaled like a man who finally knows the road's name. Walt brought fresh boards for the cider room floor and grinned when he saw me dragging my work table into the sun. After any storm, you lay it all out to dry, he said. We opened windows to flush the vanilla candle smell and let fermented apple back in. I pulled the new curtain hooks, dusted the frames, and hung Grandma's photo exactly where it used to live. When I climbed the chair to seat the last screw, her apple peeler slipped from a high cabinet, flashed once, and settled into my palm. I laughed and planted it in a scrap block by the stove, blade turned inward, a promise not to draw blood. At noon, MS. Green stopped by with a thin packet, the Trust's Sustainable Orchard Guide for Families. She pointed out the small programs, shed roof help, winter pruning workshops, a list of students wanting hands-on work. Around here we share hours, she said. Money matters, but time is what keeps roots. I logged it and filed it in the FOB like adding a new supply line. Evening, Dad and I sat on the steps under a crescent moon thin as an apple peel. He spoke in pieces about being left behind, about fatigue stacked inside overdue envelopes. I listened the way you listen to an engine, fine the wobble, tighten the right bolt. "Tomorrow," I said. "You call the tax office for a counseling slot. I'll pull a materials list. Walt handles tools. By late day, we invite a few neighbors." He blinked. "For what?" "Apple BBQ," I said. "No glamping, just a wood fence and a charcoal grate." He laughed, smooth as oiled chain. 2 days later, the yard smelled like sweet smoke. Walt set the grate. I marinated chicken with cider, salt, black pepper. Neighbors brought bread. Someone showed with a wheel of cheese. Cold country sentences did their work. "You good? Holler if you need." Dad posted up by the cooler, hands steady. Kids ran the rows, leaves cracked under their boots. No faux fairy lights anywhere, just sunset working the skins of red fruit. I staked a small wood sign by the cider room door. "Apple Mercy, Saturdays for sisters." Under it I wrote by hand, "Weekends for women veterans, light work, pressing, cooking, sitting together." I didn't want a program. I wanted an open porch. The first town post was only a photo of the old press and a few calloused hands. Messages came quiet. A woman from Fort Drum asked to stop by. A former Iraq medic wondered if there was a quiet chair. I answered them all the same. "Come, the heat will be on the stove and in the room." In the FOB, I wrote my AAR. Objective, protect heritage, prevent conversion against the easement. Met. Strengths, clean evidence trail, steady command presence, land trust engaged at the right beat. Weaknesses, slow to read dad's money pressure, open support lane earlier next time. Lessons, in family ops, clean beats fast, evidence beats volume, a plan beats convenience. Next steps, finish the east roof, clear drains, run Apple Mercy weekly, seed a no orchard fights alone fund. Weekend, the first women arrived. Each carried her own scent, cough syrup, old gun oil, dorm soap. They looked at the press like a time machine. We washed fruit, trimmed the bruises, and pressed a ribbon of cream gold juice. Foam rose and popped under the shop light like tiny snow. When the first glass went hand to hand, a woman a few years younger than me cried so softly it was almost steam. "I thought I'd forgotten this smell," she said. I touched my glass to hers, no speech, just the small, clean ritual of glass on glass. After cleanup, I stayed in the kitchen and wiped the peeler. I set it back in the block, blade turned in. Grandma's frame caught a tongue of stove light. I reopened the little envelope marked for Elena and reread the line. "Money doesn't know how to turn white." I smiled. Money can do plenty. Blooming requires roots. Roots need someone patient, someone who fixes the roof when it leaks and lowers her voice when others shout. Late, my father texted. "At Walt's helping set the floor, home soon." Then another, "Thanks for not leaving the house." I set the phone down and stood in the doorway. No string lights, just stars and a few stubborn fireflies. Wind mixed apple with pine. I thought about the army, the convoys over passes, the women who just sat around our press. A new mission had begun, keep the ordinary beating. I pulled the door, killed the light. The house breathed easy. On the counter, the Apple Mercy board dried. Under it, I added a thin line, almost a whisper. "Come in and sit. The orchard will say the rest." And in the warm dark, I heard Grandma, not a memory now, but a gentle order fulfilled. "Hold fast, then move." We held. Now we move not far, just between our own trees.